A single barrage of BrahMos missiles could wipe out an entire Chinese aircraft carrier group in minutes, leaving Beijing's naval forces crippled. Now, Vietnam is racing to acquire this supersonic weapon in a $700 million deal following the Philippines' lead. This isn't just an arms purchase, it's a direct challenge to China's dominance. Let's dive in. Tensions in the South China Sea have been building for years, but now things are shifting in a way that China may not have anticipated. The Philippines was the first to take a decisive step, acquiring the BrahMos missile system from India in a $375 million deal back in 2022. It received the first shipment in April 2024, officially bringing a supersonic, precision strike weapon into a contested zone. That move alone was enough to raise alarms in Beijing. But now, Vietnam is finalizing its own $700 million deal, a deal that is significantly larger, suggesting that Hanoi is not just dipping its toes into missile deterrence, but is fully committing to a new military strategy. China has yet to make a strong public objection, but its silence shouldn't be mistaken for indifference. The stakes have never been higher, and if Beijing is waiting for the right moment to respond, what form will that response take? Hanoi's decision to move forward with the BrahMos purchase marks a major departure from its traditionally cautious approach to dealing with China. For years, Vietnam has preferred to handle disputes quietly, diplomatically, behind closed doors, avoiding actions that could be perceived as open defiance. But the situation is different now. Beijing's aggressive Coast Guard tactics, military buildups, and intimidation at sea have made it clear that diplomatic restraint is no longer enough. One of the clearest signs of Vietnam's changing stance came in October 2024, when Chinese Coast Guards boarded a Vietnamese fishing boat, severely injuring 10 fishermen. This wasn't an isolated incident. Similar cases have been reported over the years, but this time, Hanoi didn't stay silent. Instead of brushing it under the rug, Vietnam openly criticized China's use of force, marking a shift from its usual low-profile approach. Could this be the final straw that convinced Hanoi to move ahead with BrahMos? The purchase itself isn't just about acquiring one of the world's fastest cruise missiles, it's about who Vietnam is choosing to align itself with. For decades, Russia was Vietnam's primary weapon supplier, making up 60% of its arms imports as recently as 2022. But the Ukraine war changed everything. Russian arms production has been stretched thin, making it harder for Moscow to meet Vietnam's demands. Hanoi needed a new, reliable defense partner, and India emerged as the perfect choice. The BrahMos missile, developed as a joint Indo-Russian venture, has been on Vietnam's radar for years, but there were obstacles. Negotiations were slow and complicated, mainly because of Russia's reluctance to allow technology transfers. But as India gained more control over BrahMos production, now handling around 60% of the missile's technology, Vietnam saw an opportunity. And crucially, Russia did not block the sale, despite its close relationship with Beijing. That raises an important question. Why? If Moscow truly values its strategic partnership with China, why would it allow a sale that could directly threaten Chinese interests in the South China Sea? The answer isn't clear, but it suggests that Russia is either too distracted by its own problems to intervene, or is prioritizing its economic ties with Vietnam over its diplomatic ties with China. Vietnam, for its part, isn't just buying weapons. It's carefully reshaping its defense partnerships for the future. By securing BrahMos, Hanoi is not only bolstering its military deterrence, but also moving further away from its historical dependence on Moscow. And this shift isn't happening in isolation. Other Southeast Asian nations are watching closely, considering similar moves. Either way, Beijing is unlikely to be pleased. So why is the BrahMos missile such a big deal? What makes it different from the weapons Vietnam already has? This isn't just another long-range missile, it's a supersonic cruise missile capable of flying at Mach 2.8, nearly 3 times the speed of sound. That means it's incredibly hard to intercept, even for China's advanced air defense systems. The Indian variant can reach approximately 500 miles, but due to missile technology control regime restrictions, export versions are capped at 180 to 186 miles. Even with that range, Vietnam can still cover key areas of the South China Sea, effectively threatening Chinese naval assets and military bases in contested waters. What makes BrahMos especially dangerous is its stealth capabilities and pinpoint accuracy. Unlike older missile systems, which can be detected and neutralized before they hit their target, BrahMos has a low radar signature, meaning it can strike with devastating precision before the enemy even knows it's coming. It can be launched from land, sea, or air, making it a versatile weapon capable of hitting enemy ships, command centers, and strategic installations. That's the kind of weapon that changes the rules of engagement, and Beijing knows it. With BrahMos in its arsenal, Vietnam wouldn't just be defending its territory, it would be actively reshaping the balance of power in the region. But Vietnam isn't the only country taking this route. Indonesia is also negotiating a $450 million deal for BrahMos, positioning itself to become the third Southeast Asian nation to acquire the missile. And it doesn't stop there. Malaysia and Thailand are showing serious interest as well. If all of these deals go through, China will soon face a much different South China Sea, one where multiple nations possess the ability to strike back in ways they never could before. The shift isn't just about military hardware, it's about changing the balance of power. For years, China has relied on military intimidation and economic pressure to keep smaller nations in check, assuming they lack the firepower to respond. But now, with BrahMos entering the picture, these nations are no longer as defenseless as Beijing once believed. If Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand follow Vietnam's lead, the South China Sea could turn into a region where Chinese dominance is actively contested rather than silently accepted. This isn't just a warning sign for Beijing, it's a shift that could force China to rethink its entire strategy in the region. China is, of course, aware of this trend. It has already voiced strong objections to the Philippines' recent deployment of US-made Typhoon missile systems, accusing Manila of undermining regional stability. Yet, when it comes to Vietnam's BrahMos deal, Beijing has not issued a direct condemnation, at least not yet. The reason for this could be tied to China's different diplomatic approach toward Vietnam and the Philippines. The Philippines is a longtime US ally, meaning Chinese pressure has little effect. But Vietnam is different. It shares a complicated historical relationship with China, and despite tensions, Beijing may believe it still has leverage through economic and political ties. Will this approach work, or is Hanoi already beyond the point of reconsidering its decision? The implications of this deal stretch far beyond Vietnam. The Philippines' deployment of BrahMos has already raised concerns in Beijing. Military analysts suggest that if Manila were to fire 24 to 36 BrahMos missiles in a coordinated strike, it could cripple a Chinese aircraft carrier group. The same logic applies to Vietnam. If Hanoi deploys BrahMos along its coastline and near disputed territories, China's ability to move freely in the South China Sea would be severely restricted. Chinese defense analysts have already branded BrahMos a troublemaker, not just because of its capabilities, but because of what it represents: a growing coalition of Southeast Asian nations actively pushing back against Chinese military dominance. But China isn't out of options. Instead of direct military confrontation, Beijing is shifting toward gray zone warfare, a strategy that relies on coercion, intimidation, and non-military pressure. The goal is to discourage Vietnam and the Philippines from fully militarizing their coastal defenses without provoking a direct conflict. However, whether this strategy will work remains to be seen. The Houthis in Yemen, despite lacking advanced technology, have successfully targeted Saudi and US assets. If they can do it, why wouldn't Vietnam or the Philippines, with the help of Indian technology and upgraded radar systems, be able to do the same? China's Coast Guard and maritime militia have already intensified harassment in disputed waters, aiming to exhaust its rivals with constant pressure. But as Vietnam strengthens its defenses, the risk for China increases. One wrong move could lead to a dangerous military escalation. China's gray zone tactics have worked in the past because its rivals lacked the means to push back, but that may no longer be the case. With BrahMos in the picture, China will have to think twice before escalating tensions, knowing that its naval assets could be at serious risk. The question now is, will Beijing continue with harassment tactics, or will it be forced to adopt a new approach in the face of an increasingly armed and determined opposition? The bigger picture is clear. India's role in Southeast Asian security is growing fast. BrahMos is more than just a missile. It's a tool of strategic influence that is reshaping alliances in the Indo-Pacific. Vietnam's deal isn't just about military capability. It's about reducing dependence on Russia, building closer ties with India, and making a bold statement in the South China Sea. The real question is, how will China respond? Will it retaliate with economic pressure, or will it quietly adjust its approach, knowing that open conflict could backfire? Whatever happens next, one thing is certain. The balance of power in the South China Sea is shifting, and China is no longer the unchallenged force it once was. Vietnam is making bold moves, game-changing or high-stakes gamble. Will BrahMos tip the balance, or are we looking at rising tensions in the South China Sea? Sound off in the comments. And if this deep dive got you thinking, hit like, share, and subscribe for more updates on global defense and power shifts.